Welcome to episode 16 of the In the Name of Service podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Barb Thompson. Here we broadcast stories of everyday men and women who've answered a call to serve in hopes of inspiring and catalyzing the rest of us to follow suit in our own way. Today's interview is with Derek Jump, prior Marine, veteran advocate, and entrepreneur. Derek shares with us about his struggles following a rich military career of 10 years and 2 deployments to Iraq, including the infamous Battle of Fallujah. The impetus for the battle began in March 2004 when 4 American private military contractors were ambushed and killed in Fallujah. U.S. Marine forces then launched Operation Vigilant Resolve to take the city back from insurgents. Although the operation ended in late April, the battle to keep Fallujah from being overtaken by insurgents lasted well into 2005. Derek's unit lost 19 of their brothers during that time, changing him forever and teaching him the preciousness of life. Derek goes on to courageously describe his struggles with depression and addiction following his military career, and how getting around other veterans and doing what he could to help others was a much-needed boost to his mental health. He highlights the importance of being fully transparent about your own story, and how, as difficult as that is, it can go a long way to positively impacting other people. Derek encourages us to find our why, admittedly easier said than done, so that when life gets difficult, it can help keep you moving forward. To connect with Derek or learn more about the 3-5 Marine and the Battle of Fallujah, please see the show note. Thank you for listening. All right, Derek, welcome to the In the Name of Service podcast. Start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your history, your background, and what's brought you to this point in life.
Thanks for having me on, Barb. I always like to take this chance anytime I can, any platform I can get, to share from my point of view anyway, to whatever audience it is, whether it's civilian, veteran, active duty, what I've done, what people I know have done and are doing now, and struggles that we've gone through as veterans, especially those that have deployed to, wherever it may be, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, all those hot spots. So I joined the military in January 16th, 2002. And, at the time you're like, oh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. But
oh yeah,
you go through boot camp, you go through all your schooling, went through, School of Infantry, went through field medical training school as a Fleet Marine Force corpsman with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division out of Camp Pendleton, California. So, you do all your training, and then basically you're done with training, and they call you a baby doc, or, you're basically a boot, is what we call you, as a boot, which is you're nothing. Your
Thanks for all that hard work.
yeah, you're nothing. Welcome to the fleet. You're gonna, here's a mop, here's a gun, but here's a mop too. So we always joke around, because there's a meme that you can see somewhere where it's a Lance Corporal or a private first class vacuuming a parking lot. Those are what boots.
Nice. Right.
But I pretty much right when I got to my unit, we call it 3-5 is what I'll shorten it down to, 3rd Battalion.
Okay.
3-5. And our motto is get some. So anytime one of us are with 5th Marines or 3-5, anytime at a bar or at a restaurant, or anytime somebody hears 3-5, you'll hear somebody yell out, get some, it's a motto. You might not even know the guy, they'll just yell out, get some. So
I feel so much better prepared now.
So right after training, I checked into my command, and they're like, all right, well, we're training up. So 6 months later, I was on a plane with my unit to Iraq, and everybody thinks it's, I don't know what they think. If we're in a C-130 military plane all the time, heading over and parachuting out of the plane onto the battlefield, that's not the case. Right. In most cases. We took Delta Airlines, and we all had our weapons with us, and took that, I don't know if it was a 14 or 18 hour trip for my first tour in Iraq. So like I said, 6 months later, we're in Iraq, and things started from there, and we can kind of get into some of that later on if you'd like. But overall, I did 10 years of service, mostly with the Marine Corps. A couple of years of it was overseas in Europe. But most of it was at Camp Pendleton or in Iraq or, other hot spots around the globe. So did that for 10 years, and it flew by, and I miss it all the time. I tell my wife that I want to go to contracting and take on like security detail. And she's like, dude, you're 40. You're not 25 years old.
Yeah.
You can't run around kicking down doors and shooting at people anymore. Here's an Xbox controller. So in a nutshell, that's it. Got out of the military. I don't know if you want me to go into that right now, but got out of the military in 2012 and have been kind of doing the military service as much as I can, being embedded with military individuals and like-minded individuals as much as possible.
Yeah. What initially led you to join the military?
9/11.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of my older, like my uncles and my grandfathers, my father didn't serve. He was a police officer, but one of my uncles, my Uncle Phil, he was in Korea and he'd been blown up, and he was just mentally and physically, he was just a wreck. Ever since I knew him, since I was a little kid. And he even told me before I shipped off for boot camp, and he was like, if you don't join the military, I'll pay for your college. No matter.
Wow.
He said, if you don't join, he didn't want me to join.
Yeah.
But in my mind, especially back then, being a small town Oklahoma boy, in my mind, it was, that old school thought of, this is my country. It's calling for people to serve, and I'm a young, able-bodied American, and I'm going to go do that in whatever capacity, that is, whatever capacity the military would need me in. I'm going to sign that dotted line that says, I'll do whatever you tell me to defend my country.
Yeah. I'm
lucky I did, because it's the most, in my eyes, the most honorable and best experience that I could ever experience, and I would never change it.
Yeah. You've had quite a long time to reflect by now on your 10 years in service. When you do that, what stands out as being most meaningful for you?
That's a big question, but the most meaningful, I would say, over 10 years, that's quite a long time, and a lot of duty stations and a lot of people that you meet and a lot of situations that you get put in. But going to war, I'd probably say it was the most exhilarating, most terrifying time. So at the same time, it was fun, but at the same time, it was scary. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And anybody that really tells you that they weren't scared at some point over there, they're just trying to be macho. And
for sure.
Because fear keeps you alive and fear keeps you alert.
Sure.
So the biggest thing that would stand out for me, and made it just a huge indelible mark on my life and my mental health, was those 2 tours I did in Iraq. More so the second tour. The first tour was almost a year long, which is kind of unheard of when you start talking about Navy and Marine Corps deployments, usually about 6 months to 7 months. But the first one was the invasion of Iraq back in March of 2003.
Yeah.
And we really didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
The government, really did.
It was all new. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it hadn't happened in so long. So that was a little bit longer. And it was more, we lost 5 guys over there, and I'm not saying 5 guys isn't a lot, but it is. And when you compare, how many that you can lose and how many we lost our second trip. So we lost five guys KIA in our first trip to Iraq. And our second trip, like I said, kind of made the biggest mark on me. And that was the Battle of Fallujah. So if you look up anywhere,
right.
One of the things I'm proud of and have the honor of being in the history books for is being part of 5th Marine Regiment, which is the most decorated regiment in all the Marine Corps, you'll hear or read about 3-5 or 5th Marines being the tip of the spear and involved in the biggest fight in our modern day war, at least in Iraq. And so I always tell people during that time is when I was molded from a boy into a man. I think any time prior to that, I was just a kid, not taking responsibility for anything, not really having to. But you go into a place that like Fallujah, where you don't know who the civilians and the terrorists and the mujahideen, and you don't know who is the terrorist. You could have women and children that are carrying bombs or AK-47s or any kind of weapon that they'll shoot at you that they have hidden. So it's hard to discern between who's your enemy and who's your friend. And then there's that line you have to walk with. Now everyone's on camera. Everyone is going to know what you're doing in the military service. Anybody could be charged with war crimes. And so if you accidentally shoot up a mosque or a school because you're getting fire from that sector, you could get in trouble for that, or you couldn't get in trouble for that, because it took a lot of tactical thought maneuver on our part. But I came back as a man, having established bonds with men all around you that are willing to die for you, and you're willing to die for them. And I don't mean that in any other term other than literal.
Literal, yeah.
We all were willing to die for one another. None of us took it as a political situation. None of us even thought about anything like that. It was just, I'm here with my weapon, with my brothers, and we're in this together. And you walk away for the rest of your life, I think, because to this day, I still have those brothers, and I can still reach out to those individuals, those that haven't committed suicide, and still talk to all their families, and you become family. So that'd probably be the biggest thing that made a mark on my life, was going through that situation and learning that life is truly precious and a gift.
Yes.
And taking care of one another, and taking care of who needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Kind of taught me a lot.
What do you think was most difficult for you?
I would say that most difficult, it wouldn't be any action or any kind of things that you see over in areas like that, because that just becomes second nature. Death becomes second nature, injuries become second nature. There'd be times where we're going through the streets and, you got burning bodies and you got dead kids, and, all that stuff that's just the norm. So you acclimate to whatever is your situation. I'd say the hardest part when I left the military.
Yeah.
The hardest part.
Yeah.
When I left the military, that was the most difficult thing for me.
Can you describe why? Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're in the military, you're basically told what your mission is, what your objective is. You have that support system, whether it be your platoon, fire, your squad, your company, their family members. You have all of that. You have those shared experiences together. When you come home, you're around, and it's not to say that civilians are bad. Civilians just don't know, what we go through. Like I think we were speaking about earlier, there are some seriously strong, adamant, ardent patriots back home here in America while we're out there fighting. But, civilians just don't know what we went through. And so it's hard to come home, especially if you join the military when you're, say, 18, 19.
Right.
And your whole adolescent to mid-young, adult life in the military. And some guys spend 20 to 30 years in the military since they were 18 or 20 years old. So they don't know anything about how to operate outside of the military. And I used to think that I was hot having served 2 tours in Iraq. Well, I have friends now that have served, 8 tours in Afghanistan and 3 tours in Iraq,
Right.
And so when you get home, you've already had the most exhilarating time of your life. You've already done and seen things that no one else or the majority of other humans on this earth have seen and done. So there's really nothing to match it, for one. Your mental health really hasn't even come into play up until the point where you are getting out or after you deployed is when I think it starts. And then once you finally get out, you lose a lot of that support system. You lose a lot of the camaraderie and brotherhood because everyone's scattered to the winds at that point. A lot of guys just come home to their hometown. I was stationed in California and Europe and other places, and then I came back to Oklahoma. Well, I don't know. After 10 years, I don't know anybody in Oklahoma. I don't know any combat veterans
right.
served with.
Right.
They're all still in California or wherever. And your mental health just starts on you. Health, and then, forget about just your mental health. I always call it kind of a tribal effect of a perfect storm. It's, if you let your mental health tackle you, especially with where you're closed off and your support system is minimal or minimized, and you do start self-prescribing, whether that be medication that the VA is giving you, medication that you're getting on the streets, or, drugs that you're getting on the streets, alcohol, and not to mention, closing yourself off. And I think a lot of us close ourselves off just because you don't understand. That's the reality.
Sure.
You don't understand. Yeah. And
right.
Who do I talk to that does understand? Just close yourself off and it's just you.
Right.
There's a meme I saw on Facebook a long time ago, and it was of a warfighter. I'm not just going to say soldier, Marine, sailor, It's just there's this warfighter, and he's dressed in his fatigue, or he's dressed in a t-shirt and some jeans, and he's got bullets and a gun and a bottle of Jack and pills all over the place, and he's by himself. But then around him, you see like 5 or 6 war fighters that are dressed up with their weapons and their helmets and their fatigues and their war gear, their battle rattle, and they're kind of silhouettes like ghosts. And at the bottom it says, no soldier or no war fighter drinks alone. Because what we're doing is, or what I did, I'll speak for myself. What I did was I would keep the memory of my lost brothers with me because I felt guilty. One, that they were gone and that I wasn't. 2, and that sounds silly, but and 2, I felt like if I forgot about them, that they would have died in vain. So I just latched on to their memory and used that as justification to self-medicate, with alcohol, among other things. And I would always think about them. There's not a day that goes by, even to this day, that I don't think about war in some fashion or another. Whether it's somebody that I've lost, somebody that I've zipped up in a body bag, firefights that we've been in. So the follow-on of military service, for me anyway, because I was put in those situations, impacted me very negatively as far as mental health went. And I didn't want to seek help. I just kind of closed myself off to the rest of the world for, 5-6 years.
Yeah.
And hated my life. And really, that's not a really good recipe when you have a child and a wife to take.
Right. How in the world did you turn it around?
So, I did what they told us to do. I followed the rules. I went to the military, followed the rules in the military, got an honorable discharge. Then they were saying, all right, son, go off to college. We got the GI Bill for you. So I went to college, got my bachelor's degree, went to graduate school. And during that time, had a fellow warfighter offered me a job. He was a program manager of homeless a homeless services network, and he hired me on as a case manager working with homeless veterans. At this point, I was still, I was drinking like a fish. But I surrounded myself with veterans. So not only were my caseload veterans, but most of the staff was veterans. So that started to open the door for, okay, I'm around people that have been.
They may understand.
Yeah. And speaking to, the case management load that I had, the very first client I had, I'm not gonna say his name, but he walked in and he's probably like this 60-year-old grumpy old Vietnam. And he's just this little guy. I mean, he's seriously like 5'5", just a little guy, and he's been through it. You can just look at him.
Yeah.
He's been on the streets for 5 years. Everyone's let him down. And, he walks in and this is my very first time ever doing this. Never, been a case manager before. Hadn't really dealt with a professional lifestyle outside of the military because this was my first grown up quotation.
Right.
And he walks in and he's like, "What the F do you want?"
I'm here to help.
Yeah. Well, this is what came to my mind, and you might laugh at it. So he's like, "What the F do you want?" And I was like, "Well, Mr. So-and-so, I was like, I'm Derek Jump, and I'm here to make your life better." And he goes, "How the F you going to do that?" And I was like, and I didn't have an answer. So I was like, I was like, I don't know, but we're going to figure it out together.
There you go.
And so I did that homeless veteran job, which kind of breached out into community outreach liaison position that I had, establishing homeless task forces around central Oklahoma at the time. So that was working with a lot of veterans, mostly Vietnam veterans, but just making sure they were housed, making sure that they had what they needed. I always called it 4 walls and a roof. And then dealing with the community, which started me off down a further path. But so that was a little bit of an uptick in my mental health, being around other veterans. And then I started volunteering for an organization here in central Oklahoma. It was, I would probably say at the time, it was, the best nonprofit veteran organization in Oklahoma as far as what it had to offer other veterans. Great brotherhood, great, it was sort of, I call it a party, but it was a party with a kicker of, camaraderie and mental health encouragement with one another. So I started off as just a volunteer for that nonprofit. And then that evolved into an internship that I had to take on for my graduate degree. So I did that as far as an internship. And it's funny because when I walked into the doors, the then director said, "Okay, well, how much, experience do you have with public speaking?" And I was like, "I used to yell at a bunch of people in the military."
Right.
I can speak in front of, thousands of people. He's like, "All right, perfect." He's like, and this is we're in Oklahoma, right? And so he's like, "I need you to go to Utah this weekend and go speak at a motorcycle rally for all the people that have donated money to us for our Remembering the 22 campaign for veteran suicide." And I'm like, okay, so that's my first assignment, is to do something I have no idea about, like the complete mission of the nonprofit. So I ended up going out there and getting cameras thrown in my face and kind of just, fed to the wolves. But it was for the better because, any situation you get put in, whether you fail or succeed, you learn something. Most of the time when you fail, you learn.
For sure. You learn a little more. Yeah.
You learn a lot more. I'm not going to do that again. Okay. And so at the time, they didn't have the funding as a nonprofit to hire me as an employee. So I continued to work with homeless veterans, but still building on that military relationship, or that veteran and military, because they worked with active duty too. But building on as far as, numbers and quality of numbers of individuals and communities and networks that lent itself to my mentality and my mindset of military service, whether they be patriots as civilians, or they'd be, military service members or veterans. Eventually, they did go ahead and hire me on as an employee, and I worked for that organization for about 6 years up until recently. As far as my mental health went, as far as that goes, it was really low. I was still abusing alcohol really bad, and which was affecting my home life, which was affecting my work life.
Yeah.
Was affecting what my job was supposed to be, which was development of programming and development of business and being a mentor to other military members. And we spoke about this earlier. I was able to, and most people aren't lucky enough to get this. And this is what I push on so many younger veterans that are getting out of the military or have been out and tell me, I'm going through a hard time right now mentally. I'm thinking about suicide, or you have those brothers and sisters that have committed suicide.
Right.
That you wish that you could have gotten to sooner. Find a mentor. Mm-hmm. I can't express, those of you out there listening, find a mentor, find who fits your mold best, whether it's a businessman or, someone that was in whatever, it doesn't have to be a leadership position when we're in the military. Find a mentor or someone that you can confide in and let them lead the pack or let them help you, because they've been there too. Eventually they were you back in the day. And they had a mentor, and they found their way. So I was lucky enough to find a mentor where my position was really limitless. I was given the platform to speak to several thousands of people over the 6 years that I was there, whether it was in Oklahoma or other states. Traveling around talking about prevention of veteran suicide, talking about my story, talking about my mental health and how it almost took me down a couple times, through suicide attempts. If I didn't have my mentor there to tell me that I am here for one reason only, and that is to touch, even if it's one veteran that's sitting there thinking about, I'm so tired of this. The only way that I can handle it is to go ahead and take myself out because I'm a burden to those around me.
Yeah.
I'm drinking so much that, it's hurting my wife and kids or my husband and kids. Because a lot of people don't think that there's several different facets to why people commit suicide. You take a guy that, got his arms blown off, in some capacity over in some type of environment. And now he has to come home and rely on his wife to take care of him, hygienically and, going to the bathroom and feeding him and being fed. Tell me that wouldn't have a huge negative mark on your mental health. So you got to think there's different factors that lead to this mentality. So the mentor that I had basically told me, if you don't find an outlet and you're not genuine and full up front with people about your story, you're not going to touch those veterans that are going through that. You're not going to touch those veterans. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to open their hearts and their minds and relate to you if you don't decide to go ahead and tell your story. And if you're not going to tell your story and tell it right and tell it to the effect of the utmost truth and sadness and depression and, even down to the alcohol abuse that you were medicating yourself with, then get off the stage, because we'll find someone else that will, because the reason that we're here is to educate our brothers and sisters and civilians on how to deal with us and how to deal with one another. So find a mentor and listen to what they have to say, because that's what I ended up doing. Was I accepted his advice. I decided that I would open myself up and I would make myself available at 2:00 in the morning and go bail a brother out of jail, or, go do whatever the issue was. If a guy just needed you to come, sit with him for an hour or two and, talk it through or talk him down. There was a time where I had a guy call me up. I was at work and he said, "Hey, I have a gun and I'm going to kill myself." He said, "I have a 2-year-old daughter here at home. I'm going to kill her and then I'm going to kill myself." and I could tell he was drunk or high. And I said, okay. I said, let's do this, man. I said, can you just give me the opportunity to talk to you? One, I want you not to do that. Okay, just can you give me your address? And so I went over to his house. His daughter's crawled up in the corner crying, and I just looked at him. He had a gun on him, and I just looked at him, and I said his name, and I said, will you just hand me that gun, man? I was like, you're making me a little nervous, or just put it down, whatever you feel comfortable with. And he put it down, and he just lunged towards me and gave me a huge hug. And
oh, wow.
We hugged for, it felt like forever. A man hug feels like forever. Especially if it's, a stranger, but that's what that person needs at that moment. And he's crying, and I got a couple of tears welling up, and I'm just asking him, will you let me take you somewhere where we can get you thinking right? And that was able to happen. Social services came in for his daughter, and but that was able to happen, and I wouldn't have been able to do that stuff had I not tackled my demons head on.
Right. Yes.
And that took a lot more than just thought and just being around others. That took a lot more to tackle those demons, and still tackling them today.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think was the scariest thing about tackling your own demons? Because obviously, like, you're seeing all these veterans, you're seeing that, alcohol or self-medication in some form is a big problem for them. It leads to many other problems in life, yet here you're holding on to your own.
Right. It's funny you ask that, because at one point, and I say at one point, but at one point throughout the years, I would feel like a poser. I'm sitting here and I'm drinking myself to death, and I'm dealing with all my ghosts. But then at the same time, every day I have veterans coming into my office, or I'm meeting them somewhere, or we're doing events, and I'm supposed to be the one they can come to and be mentored by, or I'm supposed to be the stable one. And it was easy for me to pretend that I was. And I'd probably say the scariest thing initially, one, I realized there was a problem, right? And that wasn't too scary. I knew there was a problem.
Yeah.
The scariest thing for me at first was letting go, or realizing that it's okay to let go of some of that baggage. In the military, we call it dropping your pack. Mm-hmm. When you drop your pack, you do unload a lot of that weight that you have on your shoulders. And in my mind, like I touched on earlier, I had all those guys. In Fallujah, we lost 19. We had 19 killed in action, and over 300 wounded. That had to get sent back home. That the enemy, we in the beginning stages kind of underestimated those guys. So you had all my guys that I went to boot camp with, or I went to School of Infantry with, or whatever. A lot of those guys didn't make it, or a lot of those guys were maimed for life. And in my eyes, if I didn't honor them, and in my mind, my crazy mind, it was honoring them by getting drunk every night and remembering them and looking at pictures of them or videos, and making sure that I thought about them every day, several times a day. I told you earlier, there's not a day day where I don't think about, putting a brother in a body bag, or, working on a guy to keep him alive, and eventually, not living. Letting go a little bit, at least the part that was negatively impacting me, realizing that those guys, if they had seen me in the state that I was in, not taking care of my family, not raising my son the way he needs to be raised, not treating my wife the way she needed to be treated, not treating myself the way that I needed to be treated, and ostracizing myself from the community, I realized that if those guys that I loved so much and I missed so much, if they saw me acting that way, they would kick my ass.
Right. Yeah.
They would be like, dude, I'm done. I'm dead. And this is how you honor my memory. This isn't, you're not living for me. And so I decided, to not be scared of that and to make that an objective in my life was to live for those brothers that didn't make it. I live for them. I wake up in the morning and I make my bed and I'm like, it's going to be a great freaking day. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to try and make a difference today.
Yeah.
Sometimes, some days I don't. Some days I do. Some days I don't know if I do,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like everything else,
Right.
You go out into the world and you're like, all right, world, I'm going to kick your ass today, and then the world kicks your ass and you're like, all right, well, I'll be back tomorrow.
That's right.
That was the first objective, to not being scared and just taking it day by day with that. Unfortunately, the drinking and self-medication was a lot bigger of an issue to adjust to. I did submit to the mental health department, whether it was going to the VA and getting mental health help, or whether if it was an outside entity going to get their help. I did, and I have been going religiously to pursue a better state of mental health with professionals that know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And one of the ones that I do every single week, but weekly I do go to mental health and substance treatment abuse doctor or psychiatrist and try and get that help that way. I did, I've been to rehab, and the rehab that I went to, I don't know what they did to us. It was a pretty unconventional rehab. I came back and I've been sober for about a year and a half now.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. But it made me realize now that my head is more clear, what my mission in life is,
right,
is to serve others.
Yeah.
And I don't mean I'm not a saint, I don't know if what I do actually works, but I try. I'm trying to do it, and I told you earlier, I've tried to be a hard ass or was a hard ass for so long in the military, and then got out and I was a confused idiot. And then once I started figuring things out and got a clear sense of what I should be doing in life and living for those of my friends that didn't make it home. Now I speak to a lot of their families, monthly or, throughout the year, just so their families can have a piece of them. So we have one guy that for the past 14 years, we've been going, like there's 50 of us that go to his parents' house. And
wow,
he was killed in action. We go to his and just have a party in his name, and that's really fun. But now that I have a clear head and I'm sober, now I realize that I want to help others, really genuinely help others, and not just fake it. Mm-hmm. So giving up that lifestyle, the drinking and the feeling sorry for myself, and escaping suicidal thoughts. Which, don't get me wrong, you listeners out there, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are days that I do have. I still have my demons.
Right, of course.
The thing is, you have to find some way to live with them. As I said earlier, there's not a day that goes by I don't think about war. But you have to learn to embrace those thoughts, and you have to learn how to live with that impact that's been made on your life. And you have to, in my opinion, you have to just basically bring that into the fold and live for not just those men and women that gave it all, that left it all out there, but their families too. Their husband, their wives, their moms, their dads, their brothers, their sisters, live for them, because their life has been completely changed for forever, losing that loved one. But realize too, they would have done the same for you.
Yeah.
They died doing what they love to do. They died for our country and they died for you. So live for them.
Yeah, it's interesting hearing you talk about the impact that your deployments made on you, as far as leaving with just this extraordinary sense of the preciousness of life, but yet you were kind of wasting yours, clear-headed, not much of the time, not regarding your own life as precious or the current lives around you as precious. And now it's like come full circle that you can fully live out that lesson that you learned?
Yeah, it only took about 12 years.
Hey, you did it. Yeah.
Around.
What either practically or philosophically has helped you stay on track? You obviously inspire others by the way that you live. So where do you believe that comes from? Like, what keeps you going?
So, to step off my high horse on helping other veterans and military members, here's what I had to do. I had to, and it's so cliche because you hear it all the time, whether it's on Facebook or any kind of social media, but it's so true. You have to find your why.
Yeah.
And that why has to be strong enough to sustain you every day.
Yes.
And so I started late in life, to find a woman that wanted to procreate with me. It took me into my late 30s, but I found a great woman, that was willing to start a family with me and put up with all of the craziness that was my life post-military. And we had a son. And, for me, growing up, my father wasn't really around. And so I wanted to do everything the opposite of what he did. My father's passed on, and so I'm not trying to speak badly of him, but he just wasn't there. And so I said, I'm going to be the dad that's there. And I don't know, something in me, and if you're a parent, you know what I'm talking about, that, there's something in you. Like, when I think about my son, even to this day, he's 6 years old. And I'm 41. I'm going to be dead by the time he's in college. But there's just something about it. Like, it could bring a tear to my eye, just depending on what he's doing. Just looking, and especially when he was younger and I was going through this and I was trying to get help. My why became my son. And, realizing now that I watch him and he does everything that I do.
Yeah.
And he's getting older, and it's like, hey, Daddy, why are you drinking? What is this drink? Or why are you doing this? Or why don't you spend time with? Probably the hardest one was, why don't you spend time with me?
Oh, wow.
And it was because I was always wanting to get drunk and cry myself to sleep. And so my why is my son, and that's what keeps me on track every day.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find your why. It really is in any aspect of life. I think, I think I'm figuring it out on my professional side. The main thing is my family.
Yeah.
And he is the reason that I stay sober. He's the reason that I try and inspire others. He's the reason why I look at life in a totally different way, as far as there's so much for it to offer.
Yeah.
And he's the reason why I am protective over my household. So find your why. I know it sounds easier said than done, but find your why, and you might be able to hopefully turn that into a life-changing, positive experience where you can step away from whatever is negatively impacting your life.
Yeah.
And improve your mental health.
Right. All right. One last question for you. I appreciate the time that you've been willing to spend with me today. For the person who's listening, who feels like a nudge or an urge towards some, service in some capacity, but they just don't really know where or how to get started, what would your advice be for them?
There are several, wherever you live, whether it's, CONUS or OCONUS or outside the continental United States or here in the States. There are so many non-governmental agencies and there are so many nonprofits. That's one way, is to find one that you believe in their mission, you've vetted who operates them, you have vetted their finances, and you truly believe in their mission and who they serve. One way to get involved is to volunteer, to get employed by those agencies, to donate to those agencies. A lot of us veterans don't like going to the VA, but there are, you go to the VA and you see veterans in need, veterans that need help, whether it's mentally or physically. You can be the change in that person's life. You know, there has been several times where being lucky enough to have the platform that I was given, where I've had people come up to me, I've had veterans come up to me and say, I was going to kill myself today and you changed that. Or I was going to kill myself today, but the person you introduced me to and brought me to this, you know, this venue or this place, that person changed my life for the better. And I feel a lot better about things, you know? So you may not think, like you said earlier, you may not think that you're making an impact, but really, seriously, man, just a freaking smile, a hug, and a hello, bro, goes so far when you're right there on the edge. I guess I'm speaking so much about veteran suicide because that was the mission that I was, you know, leading for so many years with the last agency I was working for. But people are right there on the edge sometimes, and a lot of the times, all they want to hear is "Don't do it."
Right. Just from one person.
Yeah.
Right.
Crying out for help.
Yeah.
Crying out for help, and no one's noticing it. No one's noticing the signs.
Right.
And you have to come out and you have to just straight up say, are you thinking about killing yourself?
Right.
That's a weird and that's kind of a crazy question to ask somebody. But
it just takes all the power right away from it.
Yeah. And all they need to hear is don't do it.
Right.
There's people out there that want you here. So
never underestimate the small stuff.
No, it's so true. Don't hesitate to go up to those old guys,
right,
and say thank you, and really mean it, and really just let them talk to you. Thank the ones that came before us. Think about what others might be going through, and you know, just be cognizant of people that are really on the edge. And ready to just exit this world. We all served together. We all signed the dotted line, you know. So in one way or another, we are all brothers and sisters. And let's just maintain the idea that we definitely are a family, because there's such a small percentage of Americans that do sign up for service, and we are the ones that did it. We're the ones that put our youth, our innocence on the line. And speaking for myself, I wouldn't have done it any other way.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that there's patriots like you that want to have me on and let me preach to whoever. I could do it forever, but I'm really lucky that I get to speak to people like you and get to be around military and veterans on a daily basis.
Yeah. Love that. Well, I think I'll end it there, but I just want to thank you for your time today and your honesty and your courage to tell your story. And I know that it'll help people open up and tell their story too. So thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Barb.